I'd like to welcome all of you here to this event honoring Carol Walker. When I was hired here, Carol was the department head, and she had the department running so well, I was able to focus on teaching and research. Nowadays, my contact with her is mostly through research. We both work through the logic group in the department, and we've attended conferences. And frankly, I'm amazed that after 14 years of being department head and 3 years in the dean's office, she was not only able to resume her research program, but work on problems in completely new areas. And I think it's a tribute to her ability. And so without further ado, I'd like to get this event going and introduce Doug Kurtz, the Associate Department Head.
I'm actually not here in my capacity as Associate Department Head. I'm here to begin the series of introducing people who get to introduce people. But the person who's going to run it, it's interesting. If you have only been in the department like 10 years, you don't remember them because you don't know them. And if you were in the department 20 years ago, you don't remember them as amongst all the things you don't remember. So just very briefly, I'm going to introduce someone whose career includes research mathematician, computer expert, business owner, there's one more, investment analyst. But none of those really matter. We're here to have a good time, and one of the best bon vivants that I know is going to help make sure that that occurs. So I'm going to turn this over to Roger Hunter. I'm looking for recognition on somebody's face. Thank you.
I'm not entirely sure why they chose me. I think they like to live dangerously, but I'm very honored to be doing this. I just want to start with a couple of my own stories of the impact that Carol's had on my life. The first has to do with when I first came here. I came here in 1976 as a visiting postdoc. And after a really wonderful year doing abelian groups with the large group that was here, I very much wanted to stay and continue research. But there were no positions available. But suddenly, at the last minute, there was a temporary position available. And it seems that the graduate dean was going on leave, and that Carol decided to fill in as acting dean. So a temporary position had opened up in the Department of Mathematical Sciences. And at that time, I knew nothing of this, but I believe that one of Carol's motivations for becoming acting dean, if not the major one, was to provide this position. In any event, I'm forever in her debt. And the following year, a tenure track position opened up, and I applied for it and was subsequently hired and was in the department for a considerable time after that, until 1993. Much later, when I became very involved in the development of the T-cubed scientific word processing system and scientific workplace, Carol, as department head, was very supportive. And as many of you probably know, she, with her brother Darryl, is the author of the mathematics manual for these packages. And more recently, with Darryl, Fred Richman, and Bob Wisner.
You'll have to use the mic. I can't hear you back.
Oh, okay. So with Darryl, Fred Richman, and Bob Wisner, they authored a calculus text and disk using Scientific Notebook. I'm sure that you'll hear many wonderful things about Carol from the other speakers here today, and I agree with them all, without reservation, ahead of time. However, I do want to sound one small sour note. I warn everyone to be very careful if Carol recommends hiring someone for software testing. In my case, she recommended one Win Johnson, a graduate student in mathematics. I discovered later that he had been living in his office in the department, and I now suspect she was using me to get him out of there. He went on to make my life a colourful hell, with his final act before leaving being his attempt to become a guest on the Jerry Springer show shortly after the Lorena Bobbitt incident. Somewhere in there was the proposal to use the local SWAT team, a few other amazing incidents. However, his departure for Mexico was uneventful in the end. And in the immortal words of John Thomas, we found ourselves happily transformed for a win-no-win situation to a no Johnson state. Some of you know the real story behind that. It's too colourful to go into here. Now, with that word of warning out of the way, I'd like to present a brief and highly biased pictorial account of Carol's life, or actually some very small part of it. These photos were given to me by her family. I think that was another mistake. Okay, so this is the story, Carol the Pictures. Now, many of you may not be aware that Carol had a childhood. Now, this could be a photo of any baby, right? But they gave it to me and I guessed it was her. She even had a girlhood. And she was enough of a child to do some horsing around. Here she is with Daryl, her brother, and sister Lynn. Daryl's here today. You'll get to meet him a little later. This is clearly a scene from a Boris Karloff film. It looks as though they didn't get the blood colour quite right. This too is a scene from the little-known classic Gone with the Snow. Eventually, Carol graduated, and after first being a musician, she became a mathematician. Now, somewhere along here she met Elbert. Now, I think they faked the dates on these things. This looks to me like when they met, because obviously the backgrounds are very similar. Hopefully you can recognize these people. And they got married. Now this looks very much like Elbert looks as though he's about to eat somebody. And I think Carol looks a little nervous. With good reason. And there were children, some of whom are here today. From the left, that's Davy, and then Danny, and Diana, and Elaine. And unfortunately, even these children have been affected by the ravages of time. The order is Diana, Elaine, Davy, and Danny. Meanwhile, Carol continued her research work in abelian groups with the local group, and this picture, I'm told, is titled After a Hard Day's Abelian Groups. So you recognize Carol and Albert, I'm sure, and then Fred Richmond. Okay, now, the last part of this is, after the family gave me these photographs, and after doing quite a bit of research, I discovered something startling, that it appears that Carol has had a second hidden career as a fashion model. And not just any kind of fashion model, but she's a specialist, and she's specialized in large eyewear. This is the wing set. I think this is sort of the Mata Hari phase. I don't know, but I tried to look this up. It might be a globular cluster. More wings. This is the hexagonal phase. And finally, the Brigitte Bardot transition. Okay, well, that's all I have for my part, and I'm about to introduce the next person. Now, we're going basically in order of the people in the order that Carol has met them. And so the first speaker after me is her brother, Darrell Hardy.
This is the Carol that we all know and love. But she didn't start out that way. So I plan to explore some of the heritage, her early role models that may have helped her become who she is today. Now, at lunch, there was some question about how correct some of these things are, but it makes a good story, so I'm going to stick with this story anyhow. In fact, I'm going to start with her great-grandparents. This is William May and Miranda Reed Hardy. They met in an Army hospital in Washington, D.C. during the Civil War. By coincidence, their ancestors, Thomas Hardy and John Reed, were parts of the early 1600s Great Massachusetts Land Patent, of which Governor Winthrop was the leader. Typical of Miranda was her poem, Resolved that Women Should Vote. Here are a few sample lines. For why, when they've been with men all their lives as grandmothers, mothers, and sisters and wives, without being injured to any degree that you and I can readily see, should a casual meeting with men at the polls one day in a year just ruin their souls? And the record of strong and talented women continued in later generations. William and Miranda appear in this picture, together with Carol's grandparents, H.O. and Eva Knowles Hardy, and their 6 children. This was about 1913 in Montrose, Colorado. Beautiful house still stands there. The 3 daughters received degrees at Stanford, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. One son died shortly after this picture was taken, and the other 2 sons got degrees in engineering from the University of Colorado. On the other side of the family, there were much more humble beginnings. Carol's other grandparents, George and Alice DeVinny, had a homestead near Ridgway, Colorado. Carol's great-grandfather, Ezekiel DeVinny, was a carriage maker in Philadelphia. And George's craftsmanship is evident as you study the homestead. If anybody's built a cabin, you can appreciate the corner, how it was built and so forth. He liked to sing and play the guitar, and after retirement, he took up oil painting. Carol has a nice collection of his oils on her website. Here's a sample painting. He did a lot of oils of desert scenes and of Colorado mountains. So it's my assumption that her intellectual ability comes from the Hardy side of the family, and a lot of her artistic talent is due to the DeVinny side. This is her father, F. Waldo Hardy. He explained to her at an early age that sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. Now, I don't think initially it made much sense to her, but after she lost her husband, Richard Piercy, in an Army training accident, then returned to CU to complete her degree in music, Carol was searching for what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. So she asked her father what calculus was all about. He proceeded some 35 years after his last look at a calculus book to describe in detail how to calculate the volume of intersection of two right circular cylinders. And this is her mother, Alice Deviney Hardy. Carol has always considered her mother to be her primary role model. To this day, I'm sure whenever Carol is faced with a difficult question, her first impulse is to ask, what would mother do? Of course, some credit should also go to her cousins, aunts and uncles, maybe even her siblings. And of course, as usual, you find Carol front and center. This is Carol right here, front and center. And then there's her schooling. She started out in Oak Grove Elementary, which was built in the 1880s. It was recently refurbished, and it's still in use. At the time she went there, it had 4 classrooms and 8 grades. And so when she was in the 7th grade, she was able to listen in on what happened in the 8th grade, and of course she learned all of that stuff. And apparently it was her Sunday school teacher that suggested that maybe she really didn't need to stick around for another year and waste that time and study the 8th grade. So she skipped into high school. And so her parents agreed and let her skip the 8th grade. At least 2 of her high school teachers are worth mentioning. The geometry teacher, Gracie Parker, explained to her students that you've never seen a point, you've never seen a line. She forced her students to think deeply about some elementary concepts and certainly reinforced Carol's interest in mathematics. And then there was band director Lloyd Hillier, who inspired several of Carol's classmates. She probably had 100 classmates or so, but several of them became professional musicians and was probably responsible for Carol's decision to major in music at the University of Colorado. Carol became the valedictorian of her high school graduating class and earned a Becher scholarship. It was later that she learned that mother had received a similar scholarship when she graduated from the same high school roughly 30 years earlier.
Well, my name is Bob Wisner, as you just heard, and I've been around here a long, long time. And I was asked to remark on some things back in those days and so forth. So I brought along this thing here, which I'm going to refer to because this is what I am going to claim that I said, whether I say it or not. I was invited by David to give this talk, to be here. Thank you, David. I know the other day, David, when you were talking about Sophie Germain, you said you wanted to share with us what you had learned. And I was struck by that phrase because it brought back a memory. I used to teach at Haverford College, which is a Quaker school. And share with you is a very Quakerly phrase. It's so nice, isn't it? I'm going to share with you some thoughts of Carol Walker, some history, as far as I'm concerned, the history of what I remember. And share with you is such a Quakerly phrase, I think I have to explain what it means. It means that I'm here and I'm talking and you're there and you're going to listen. That's what share with you means. My first connection with Carol dates back to when I was at Haverford College and I was working on Irving Komplatsky's new book, Infinite Abelian Groups. And he had 3 test problems in there to show that infinite abelian groups are not all that simple to work with. And I was working of these three problems, nobody had solved one of them until one day I noticed in the proceedings of the AMS, there was an article by a whippersnapper named Elbert Walker. And he had solved, as a graduate student, he had solved the third test problem. And that year was 1954, right? 1954. And I read that paper and I thought, there's a smart guy. So I looked at, he was at the University of Kansas. I knew some people at Kansas and I called him up and talked to him and they told me that he was a good guy. Well, after a few years, I got hired by the Committee on the Undergraduate Program in Mathematics, Mathematical Association of America, and that's a full-time job. I did that for 3 years. And in the first year that I did that, we held a conference of Western states, of people from universities and colleges in the Western states, mathematics departments. And at that conference was Elbert Walker and Ralph Crouch, the department chairman. And I met them both and talked to them a while. And then we started using people from NMSU math department and some people from the education department too, by the way, at least one person, and working with them on trying to improve the training of future elementary school teachers. We had a program of, an outline of what we thought was minimal training for such people. And Elbert ran some errands for us, so to speak. He went over to New Mexico Military Institute and found out what they were doing over there and wrote an interesting report, which he refers to various faculty members as colonel. And then he explained that everybody in that place is a colonel. All the professors or teachers are colonels. In any case, after 3 years, I quit. And but in that 3 years, I had come down here in December. And I couldn't believe it. I was living in Michigan at the time. I came down here in December, and it was warm. I was born in the Midwest, and I grew up in the Midwest. And I never thought I knew that there were theories about people being warm in the winter, but I didn't actually believe it. I was down here in December, and it was warm. I know I'm repeating myself, but it just struck me as so weird, you know. So, and I paid a few more visits here during those 3 years. And so at the end of 3 years, I called up Ralph Crouch and I said, I want a job down there. Well, he offered me an amount of money. If I were to tell you the amount of money that he offered me, you would say, how quaint. I was already making a heck of a lot more than that, but because, of course, I was in this other job, but they paid me an extra 50% for not teaching, running around the world and doing other things. So I said, Ralph, that's not quite enough money. You've got to come up with a little better than that. And it turned out that just at that time, Elbert and Carol were going to go to they were newly married, I think, and they were just going to the Institute for Advanced Study. And I'm convinced that it was during that year that Ralph Crouch twisted some arms of some administrators, bent their ears, did what it took for them to change their mind about hiring husband and wife in the same department. It was against the policy of the university at that time to do so. In any case, at the end of that year, Elbert and Carol returned, and I was so happy about that, to see that Carol was then a member of the faculty. that she is the one who caused us to change our ways, caused the university to get rid of that silly rule. And today we have, I have the figures here on it, someplace. 43% of the math department faculty, the total faculty, are females. 43%. By golly, I'm willing to bet money that there is no other coeducational state-supported institution in the country with 43% female math department. I challenge anyone to find one with more than that. And so Carol is a pace setter in that regard. It's been a great pleasure to work with Carol for these many years. During my first year here, during the first year actually she got back, she and Fred Richmond and I, by the way, when I came here, the department had 6 people. They hired 5 more. The department grew from 6 to 5, one swell foop. And Fred Richmond was among those. During that first year that Carol was back, Fred and Carol and I taught a course in mathematics for the liberal arts student. And we all agreed that the book was terrible. We all agreed that it didn't fit our students. We all agreed that we could do better. And so we decided to write a book. And thereby we became that, I have a phrase for it, that treasonous phrase in mathematics is textbook writer. We became textbook writers. That book is now in its 5th edition. And we had a wonderful way of writing the book. We agreed on the chapters, we agreed on the outline, and then we would take a section. One person would take a section and write it and give it to the other 2, and they would make whatever changes they wanted. We didn't argue about anything. We just wrote that way, and it worked out very well. It's a great pleasure to have worked with Carol all these years on that. But then just recently, she and her brother, he's my Ph.D. student. She and her brother talked me into joining in with a group of people to turn on an electronic calculus. We did that. Then we wrote 3 more books to go with it. So they're all in the calculus offering stage. So we continue, the 3 of us are going to have a confab about how to sell these books. Nobody wants to buy them. They would much rather buy a 5.5-pound calculus book for $150 than a 2-ounce calculus disc for $115. But we'll change their way of thinking. I don't know whether the new Kindle will help with that or not. It's certain, just the idea that you can do things electronically. Let's face it, books are soon going to be passé. So I want to say in addition to making our department co-ed, I want to ask you, do you like this building? This is a nice room, isn't it? And 105 is a nice room. The classrooms have 35 to 40 seats. Carol put that over on the administration. This is Carol's design. Not very many people know that she helped design this building. Carol is not just smart. She is very nice. She's nice to work with, easy to cajole. When I don't know something, I could go and buy some thing about to help me understand scientific workplace, which is what we use. I could buy books to do that, but it's so much easier to write Carol an email. And she'll just tell me, and she does so in a nice, friendly manner, so I haven't had to buy any of those books. Carol is totally without guile. That's one of the most marvelous things about her. It's just so pleasurable to work with her on things because of that. There's a classic scholar who said, the first great gift you can bestow on others is being a good example. And Carol fits that phrase totally. So here we are today, honoring an accomplished teacher. By the way, she used to teach music. Teacher, researcher, administrator. How many people can do all those things as well as she has? Nobody. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is the person I came to this country to work with, and for whatever reason, still work with. Certainly in different areas. I'd like to ask Elbert Walker to say a few words.
They asked me to say a few words, and I thought, what in the world am I going to say? And I decided I'd talk about her mathematical career. I mean, people talk about all these other things, and Daryl shows pictures, baby pictures and whatnot. And so I'm going to talk about a mathematical career. I may get some of the dates wrong, so don't correct me, please. In 1959, a graduate student showed up here, wanted to study mathematics, and she had a bachelor's degree in music and a course in number theory and calculus, and wanted to be a graduate mathematics student, and that was pretty quaint. Anyway, I was her advisor. And in fact, we were mentioning this earlier, I was her advisor, and I looked at her transcript and said, that isn't much help. And anyway, 4 years later, she had a Ph.D. Needless to say, she was a very good student. I had her in, I don't know, 2 or 3 classes, or I don't know how many, I forget now, it's been so long. And however, there was one occasion I have to tell about, and I see Ed gone back there. Carol studied very hard. Very, very hard. In fact, for a final examination in complex variables, she studied so hard and so long, she slept through the final exam, which was the next day at 2 p.m. And Carol and Ed worked that out somehow, I don't know how it happened. She came here the first year, she just showed up, so how was she supported? Now, you don't have to believe this. She had a band scholarship and played the piano for the university singers. But she was she was such a good student that she got a National Defense Education Act fellowship for the next 3 years. And so the next 3 years she was supported that way. So she never was a teaching assistant, for example. But it was okay because she, as somebody mentioned earlier, she had teaching experience. She taught music 1 year to elementary school students. So she had training as a teacher. By her 3rd year in graduate school here, she was doing research with some of the professors, me and at least one other person. And then there was a question of who was to be her her thesis advisor, and Dave Harrison was here in 62, 63, and Dave Harrison was his interest was in category theory and homological algebra and stuff, and that was a big deal then, and decided that Dave Harrison he agreed to direct her thesis. Now the following happened. Dave Harrison said, okay, now here's what you do. No more research. Write up some of the stuff you've already done, but I want you to learn some more topics before you before you graduate. So I don't know of any other case where a thesis advisor said, okay, no research, you write up some stuff you've already done. So that's what happened, and she got her Ph.D. in 63 and applied and got a National Science Foundation postdoc. Now, I don't know how many were given then, but when I was at NSF in 87 to 89, I was involved in that postdoc program, and we gave between 20 and 25, depending on the quality of the applicants and how much money we had. So it was a pretty good deal getting an NSF postdoc. And not only that, she got a membership for a year at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. And we had gotten married in the end of 62. and we spent the summer of 63 in Germany at the University of Tübingen doing research. And then back in Princeton Institute in the 63, 64. And then the department had the good sense to hire her and let me come back after sabbatical. I was on my first sabbatical in 64. So she was hired in 64. In 66, she became associate, and in 72, full professor. As you know, there was in those days, there was a large group of abelian group theory people here, including the illustrated Roger Hunter and others, and Ray Mines, if he's in the audience. Anyway, there were a large group of us, and she was on had various and sundry NSF research grants, and I forgot, after we were in Germany that summer, at the end of the summer, we went to a abelian group theory conference in Hungary, outside Budapest, and where she was to give a talk. Now, she played a very dirty trick. When she was scheduled to give her talk, she got sick, and I had to give the talk. So, and you still haven't repaid me for that. I had to give the talk. Anyway, one other thing, I happened to remember the other day, at one stage in the department, there was a policy of giving young professors a semester off from teaching just to spend full time at research. And she had one of those. I don't know if it was a semester or a year, I think a semester. She had one of those. And then in 79, I believe, she became chairman of the mathematics department and was chairman for 14 years. Now that temporarily ended her research career, because that was a big job, and she worked she hired various and sundry people here, and it was a big deal. And then in 1993, she became associate dean of arts and science and director of the research center. Now, if you're director of arts and science, of a research center, you should be doing some research. So she had to deal with them to spend one day a week in the math department. Now, she didn't do exactly that. What she did was spend 2 half days. And so we started doing research again, and in particular with May Gerke. But as somebody mentioned earlier, what was really remarkable about that, she had to change field. I mean, it was abelian groups back when, and all of a sudden it was lattice theory and universal algebra and this, that, and the other. So it was a change of field. She sat in on some of May Gerke's classes and whatnot and wrote, 6 or 8 papers with May and whatnot. And then he retired when? In 96, I gather. And still doing research. That was over 10 years ago, and still doing research. And if you want to see sort of what she does, look at her webpage, which you can find by clicking around on the New Mexico State Mathematics Department website. And she's still at it. And I'll give you some. We travel quite a bit and give papers in various places, and I'll tell you what I know about our what year is this? our 2008, schedule. Of course, we're going to AMS meeting in January in San Diego, but we'll be giving papers in Austria in February, in New York in May, in March, March in Japan, and in June in Hong Kong. And we travel and give papers and whatnot, and it's still hard at research. But when you do travel and give papers, you got to pick good places to go. That's the first. That's the first thing. And I think after Hong Kong, we're going to go to Thailand and visit Hung Nguyen. Anyhow, Carol told me 2 or 3 times that occasions like this kind of make her, and she's not too happy about all this. But I think in spite of, I think that's, if I may be politically incorrect, that's woman's talk. I think she's proud of. I do think she's proud of this occasion, and I know I am proud of her both as administrator and especially mathematician and wife. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elbert. The next speaker is Dean Tom Gale. After hearing about Carol's mathematics career, I think you're going to hear a little bit about her administrative career.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to continue talking about Carol Walker. To hear Bob Wisner's remarks, Bob indoctrinated me into the ways of the math department when I arrived in 1971, but that's a separate 20-minute talk, and so I'll be given some other time. Carol Walker is one of the stellar lights of the New Mexico State University faculty and administration, and others speak to her academic achievements, but I would like to direct my brief remarks to her remarkable tenure of 14 years as head of the Department of Mathematical Sciences. It was my good fortune to have been a close working colleague of hers during almost all of those years, and I personally attest to Carol's success as head of the department. I do not think it's necessary to remind you that the Department of Mathematical Sciences is unlike any other in the university. When I came to NMSU in 1971, it was the elite department, the recipient of excellence grants that had allowed the department to recruit a superior quality faculty. It was also one of the largest departments in the university. It had university-wide responsibilities matched by no other department. It was the first department with a Ph.D. program and a faculty with a large research component. It sponsored a nationally important holiday symposium, and as a department had a considerable national visibility. Yet at the same time, it had a huge teaching responsibility at the undergraduate level that touched every sector of the university. The department has had good leadership since its beginning with Hiram Hadley, the founding president of the university, which was the first department head, through the remarkable 32-year headship of Clarence D. Haggerty, and after World War II, the department heads of Errol Walden, Ralph Crouch, Jack Geaver, Ed Gaughan, Bob Wisner, and John Dupree. And somehow one of the department's most distinguished senior faculty members, Elbert Walker, escaped being department head. But perhaps his good influence on the headship was not completely lost to the department. In 1979, Carol Walker began her 14-year tenure as department head and achieved remarkable success in the task. I think being an academic department head is perhaps the hardest job in the university. It entails a lot of stress, meeting the demands of many individual faculty members, working with an inadequate departmental budget, representing the interests of the department at other levels of the university administration, and scheduling all those courses needed by students and still cater to the individual interests of the departmental faculty. All department heads have these kinds of pressures, but the head of the Department of Mathematical Sciences has pressures of the kind no other department suffers. No other department serves the whole university in the same way as does mathematical sciences, except perhaps, and in a lesser way, the English department. For instance, Carol had to deal with our academic friends in engineering until their students pass their math courses. They cannot really take much engineering work. If too many of their students fail math, engineering doesn't have many majors or upper division students. You can imagine the anxiety this causes in engineering, and no wonder that engineering carefully monitored the success rate of its students in math courses. Carol had the very difficult task of maintaining the quality of math courses for engineers, making sure the pass rate was adequate, and be the ambassador to the College of Engineering to keep the peace between engineering and arts and sciences. And what about the College of Education? Here is where diplomacy must be of the highest order. Mathematical education in the schools is a sensitive issue, and the College of Education has made efforts to improve math education at all educational levels. But it has to be done with the help of the math department. And here, Carol has been outstanding in working with the faculties of both the Department of the College of Education, and we all must give considerable credit to many in this department for their work with the public schools. It is an ongoing task, and Carol undertook it with sensitivity and creativity. And then there are friends in the College of Business and Economics. Many of the same issues as in engineering and education apply here. Again, in the numerous liaison committees working with math and the other colleges, Carol did an outstanding job bringing resolution to many outstanding points of contention. There are the general education requirements all students must meet. Much time and energy on Carol's part were absorbed in finding solutions to math course success. The Office of the Dean clearly recognized the remarkable capabilities of Carol as head of the Department of Mathematical Sciences. Her yearly reviews attest to this. But what about the evaluation of her departmental faculty? Faculty are people with high expectations, and their assessment of college administrators can be very mixed. But in Carol's case, her departmental reviews were not mixed. The departmental faculty always had high praise for her administrative abilities and her integrity and sensitivity in personal relations. Her remarkable 14 years as department head set her apart in the College of Arts and Sciences as one of the most successful department heads the college has ever had. This success attests to her qualities of leadership, talent, energy, sensitivity, and integrity, all of which she has applied to making New Mexico State University a better place. Thank you.
I have to confess, though, that I found her very intimidating to work with at first She was just so darn good at everything. And she has this habit of silence, which always tends to bring forth uncontrollable babble when I'm around her. But it didn't take too long for my apprehension to turn to admiration. I learned that Carol valued and respected all of the faculty members that she worked with in the department. She was committed to running an open, democratic department where every decision could be discussed, debated, and decried if necessary. It was always fun to watch Carol, who tended to be sort of a listener within the department, when she was at meetings outside of the department. Her voice there was heard loud and clear, particularly if she disagreed with the decision. She could be relentless with her questions, and ultimately she was very persuasive to the people around her. Carol certainly jumped on the opportunity to get mathematics more space when they started talking about building a new building. And she did spend long hours in the planning of Science Hall. You know, she is a detailed person, so if you don't like the placement of those plugs, it's probably her fault. Under her leadership, the department grew in size, in budget, and reputation. Maybe people outside the department really valued mathematics more in the good old days. But I don't think so. I think Carol was always able to effectively communicate the department's accomplishments, the department's challenges, and the department's needs. I have been very privileged to have Carol as my department head, as my mentor, and as a very dear friend. But when I think about it, what ultimately characterizes Carol to me, and that is integrity. Carol's commitment and vision to do what was right for the university was always strong enough to lift and unite the faculty that she worked with so that it could function as a cohesive unit within the larger community. Faculty members could always trust Carol to be both fair and honest, and therefore they felt safe to engage in innovation and risk-taking. I'm sure that I'm not the only person in this room who wears an invisible WWCD bracelet. What would Carol do when it comes time to make a decision? When Carol retired as Associate Dean, she resumed the roles of mathematician and author, roles that I know that she missed during her years as an administrator. But thankfully, she did spend those years as an administrator. And thankfully, she continues her service to New Mexico State University, because all of us in this room are richer for having had Carol.
The next speaker is Doug Kurtz, who followed Carol as department head.
As I was sitting here paying strict attention to all of the speakers, my mind wandered onto doing a little arithmetic. Carol was department head for 14 years. It's been 14 years since you've been department head. And in that time, we have chewed up and spit out 5 men. I don't know what that says, but I thought it might be a relevant observation here at some point. You didn't know that, huh? 20 years ago, you were still department head. 20 years ago, when I think about what Carol was doing, she was supporting scholarship in a very broad sense. Last year, we wrote that into our function statement. We have the word creative activity. We have scholarship. It's replaced the sole word research. When I came here, it was obvious to me from day one that teaching mattered. We've been very fortunate. We've hired people who went to who got trained at excellent mathematics departments. We went to places where the people who were recognized did research. And if you were able to teach, that was excused also. And it was very nice to come to a place where people did research and it was expected that teaching was going to be an important part of your job too. Another big thing about Carol was that she placed the needs of others above her own. The needs of faculty, the needs of students. She even placed the needs of deans, which I never quite understood. But I think in the end, what was really most special for me is that she is a model of how a department head should be. And for me, that's quite important because I was the one who inherited the department from her. If you've never been department head, what you don't understand is that there are two things to the job. You go to meetings and you write memos. It takes about a year to get a full set of memos. And computers have helped out a lot. And then you can sort of do the job. Now, Carol was very concerned, interested in making sure that I had what I needed when I became department head. Every February, there's the big meeting with the deans where you say what a wonderful job the department's doing. And we sat down. She gave me this notebook that was this thick with everything I could possibly need to say. I felt very well prepared. She went on sabbatical. It's the first day of the job. I sit down at my desk. I open this drawer. And there's memos in this drawer. And I open this drawer. And there's memos in this drawer. It didn't take me very long to realize that every memo Carol had written as department head, some people understand this, for 14 years, we're in the office. There's more, because some of you may not remember computers many years ago. They didn't used to be the perfect machines they are now. They would occasionally crash. Sometimes when they crashed, you lose important stuff. So Carol learned about backing up. She didn't learn about erasing. And so not only was there every paper copy from 14 years, there were multiple computer files from, I would say, 10 years. They were all there for me. Unfortunately, I didn't know any of them, and I didn't know what they said. But when I think of Carol, there's a little pack rat there. I might also mention that in the basement of Walden Hall, there were 2 rooms of boxes. Anyway, that's what I want you to remember about her. What I want to tell you is that you make people around you feel important, and you've been a positive influence on my life, and I thank you for it.
The next speaker is one of the co-organisers of this event, David Pingali.
I'd just like to say a very few personal things about Carol and to Carol. Carol, you've been an incredibly important influence in my life as well, just like Doug said, and I thank you the same as he did. Doug and I came here just about the same time, and I think the influence we've felt from Carol has been similar in some ways. A few things I just want to mention that I notice and value greatly about Carol. She often, in my mind, and I should say that most of my sort of daily interactions with Carol have been while she was department head, in my mind. And so for me, that's been her major role in my life, aside from the fact that she's also a great friend. And I came to realize after many years that she would seem to work behind the scenes on things. I don't mean in secret, but that things would get talked about, and then you'd think that, well, that discussion's done, and then you'd find out a week or two later that Carol had been thinking about this all the time, and she'd come up with some wonderful idea for how something could be achieved, something that perhaps I wanted, or perhaps I hadn't even realized I wanted, or perhaps even hadn't realized was possible, and she would all of a sudden tell me about something that we could do, or rather that she could do, and I could do, and other faculty could do to make great things happen. So she's an incredible enabler of great things by thinking about ways she can make them happen and then acting on them. I'd like to give just 2 tiny personal examples of that. One is our entire educational innovation that began with our Calculus Projects program with National Science Foundation funding. Carol had an incredible impact on how that came about and how that worked out over a many-year period. And one other very specific thing, which I think is a good illustration of this, in the late 1980s, Reinhard Laubenbacher and I wanted to start developing 1 or 2 honors courses based on primary historical sources. And we needed a little bit of help to learn the history and materials that we needed to create these courses. And the College of Arts and Sciences at that point had something called a special teaching assignment that faculty could apply for to obtain some release from teaching to be able to do something to, for example, develop new courses. And I remember very well that Reinhard and I applied for this with Carol's encouragement. And there was supposed to be I have to be very careful what I say here because the dean in question, whoever it was, is probably here in the room. We applied for this, and there were supposed to be 2 or more of these awarded. And we were very encouraged and thought this would go great. And we were told one day that we had been considered second in the competition, and then, but that unfortunately the college had discovered it really didn't have quite the money for this that it thought it had, and they'd at best be able to award 1 of these. And so, sort of bad luck, you know, we were hoping to give you 1, but now there's no money, so tough luck. And about a week or so later, Carol said, you know, maybe we can make this work. And she'd been thinking about it, and she had a way to make it work. And she went to the dean, it might have been Tom, I'm not sure, or Renee, and before I knew it, we were able to do what we wanted to do. And she'd figured out how to make it work. I won't give you the details, but that's the kind of thing that she did all the time. So I always have felt in extremely good hands with Carol as a very nurturing, smart, and capable department head who could make wonderful things happen. And I'd like to talk for a moment about things that have already, something that's already been mentioned, which is that our department has done way better, I think, than most mathematics departments in this country at trying to have work towards a 50-50 balance between women and men on the faculty. And I've often wondered why it is we've managed to do that. And I think the reasons are complicated, and we don't understand them very well, except that one very important thing is probably the kind of environment that that's been created here, the kind of nurturing environment that we have that on the one hand encourages and on the other attracts good people to come here, both men and women, and a very collegial place in which we have just the right balance, I think, between teaching and research, which is something that was just mentioned. And I think that all these things have had a big impact on the fact that we now have as many female faculty as we do. And I think the kind of nurturing and smart thinking and encouragement that Carol created as 14 years as department head has obviously had been a very big factor in that. Not to mention, of course, the parties that one could count on at Carol and Elbert's house, even to today, which also is an incredibly important part of a nurturing collegial atmosphere. I'd like to end by briefly telling you about a dream that I had once. Usually we don't air our dreams in public, but this one's fit for consumption. And I should mention to you that I'm a person who usually doesn't remember any of his dreams for even 15 minutes from the time I wake up, let alone 15 years. And I think this dream probably happened about 15 or 20 years ago. And I think just the little mental image of this dream will tell you how I feel about Carol. I remember being sort of outside the southwest corner of Science Hall, and it was a beautiful New Mexico sunset. The sun had set, and there were these incredible colors of oranges and reds across the sky and the clouds, and these colors were shining on the windows of Science Hall, in particular the southwest second floor windows, which is our department head's office. And Carol was there. In the office, of course. It was probably 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and that's no surprise that Carol was there working at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And I just remember this feeling of seeing Carol in this wonderful sunset glow in her office, working away for all of us, and having this warm, glowing feeling that all was well, and things were good. And that's a dream that's stuck with me for 15 years, and I just wanted to mention it to you. So thank you very much.
And the next speaker is Maria Sanchez.
I get all this help, you see? That's what happens when you're not an instructor or a teacher and not used to getting up in the podium. But yeah, those archives are just wonderful, aren't they? This came out of Carol's file. She had retained it there. I thought that was cool and wanted to share that with you all. Some of her classmates, when she graduated with her Ph.D. in 1963, but it came out of this publication here. Anyway, it's an honor and a privilege to recognize and congratulate Dr. Carol Walker on a service well done. It was through her leadership and dedication that the support staff assisted her in meeting the department's and university demands to math awareness. By the way, I'm supposed to talk about her support staff. She worked diligently to strengthen the department's teaching, research, and service, both domestic and international. Believe me, the support staff knows this for a fact. They typed and retyped, corrected, mailed, packed, and at times delivered her coordinated matters related to curriculum, advising, and welfares demanded of her, which were demanded of her. The fact is supported by a letter I found in Carol's file written to Sephora Davis a couple of years prior to Carol being department head, as she was on sabbatical leave at Colorado State University. Carol wrote, "Also, we have not yet received the divider and filing shelves I asked Belinda to send from my office. I'm sorry we did not get those things taken care of before we left, but we ran out of tape and string and imaginations at the last minute." She also wrote, "I have a few more pages written for the paper you all are typing, but I would like to hold them until I see what is typed, if it is on its way. Would you please send me 2 copies so I can get one and send one back? If one copy has already been mailed, send another one now. If it is not ready, please let me know when to look for it. Carol, it's not that your request wasn't justifiable, but boy, oh boy, remember the office equipment and software and the typewriter for certain formulas one had to use to type such a paper? Thank goodness your handwriting was neat and legible. Remember the day-to-day activity in the front office created from both students and faculty, with the phones ringing and the interruptions and on and on and on. Yes, Carol, you did demand a lot of the staff. This was prior to you being department head, but nonetheless, it prepared us well. Carol is really a pioneer. If you really know Carol, then you know what I mean by saying she is a pioneer. So I wanted to ditto Dean Gale. Thank you for that lovely speech. For her foresight, direction, and determination are strengths in which made her a successful department head and researcher. Know that that quiet demeanor of hers that doesn't go unnoticed, her caring, nurturing, and thoughtfulness touched many of her fellow peers and staff that made the departments a great place to work and develop one's gifts and research. Here are some comments from your staff when you were department head. From 85 to 94, Valerie Reed, now steward, reinforces this as she stated, "What can I say about Carol? She was my first boss at NMSU, and she was wonderful to work for. If there ever was a crisis in the office, you wouldn't be able to know it by her demeanor. She has a wonderful sense of humor, which was appreciated throughout the office." She recalled one story that Carol told her about when she was taking roll in one of her classes, and she was coming up on the student who was named Jesus. She could just feel him tense up for the fear she would pronounce it using the English version and not the Hispanic version. He was quite relieved when she used the correct version. In 85 to 90, Janet Moore said, "Yes, I would love to comment on how grateful I am to Dr. Walker for giving me my first job on campus and giving me the opportunity to work at NMSU 22 years ago. She was not only a great department head, but truly a wonderful person to work for. When I'm asked who was the person who made a difference in my life, I always think of Dr. Walker for so many reasons." In 79 and 80, Matilda Evaro wrote, "It's been years since I worked in the Department of Mathematics, and my mind does not remember very much anymore. I do remember that when she was here in the dean's office, I always felt comfortable talking to her when needed. She would sit very quietly and calmly, twisting her hair, and listen wholeheartedly to every word said, and of course, would have a great response or solution to the matter discussed. She was an excellent boss to work for." You know, I had forgotten that Carol did and still does twist her hair. I concur with Valerie and Janet and Matilda, but I have to mention the infinite retention of records you had as archive. Okay, so some of it kept us out of hot water. Don't worry, I still have the 5 boxes of paper and data you left in your office. Just let me know when you're ready to go through them. All kidding aside, I hope throughout your years as department head, you've been able to retain more pleasurable moments than stressful ones, that your support staff did in one way or another support you as you supported them. Here is a presentation prepared for you on behalf of your secretarial and accounting staff from 1979 to 1983.
Let's see. First, I would like to thank David and the rest of the organizers of this event for giving me the opportunity to participate in this celebration of Carol's career. I'm truly honored for that. I've known Carol for quite a long time, but I've grown to appreciate her many talents, mostly during the time that I was Associate Dean from let's see when, this is ancient history here, from 1985 to 1990, and then as Dean from 1991 to 2002. The one thing I will spend most of my remarks on her accomplishments as the Associate Dean for Associate Dean of the College and the Director of the Arts and Science Research Center, but I do want to say something about her as a department head, since I was Dean when she was a department head, and that is to relate something about what I learned from the faculty evaluation of Carol. I already knew that she had wonderful talents as an administrator, but it was very, very enlightening to me to participate in this evaluation and to learn what you had to say about her. And this was her last evaluation by the faculty, and she had already been a department head for 12 years. Now, the results were amongst the best that I have ever seen for a department head. And the interesting thing was that in looking back at the records, the results of her evaluations became better on every occasion. And this is truly unusual, because usually those evaluations for longtime department heads and administrators, I might say, follow more of a bell-shaped curve than to see. Now, many of you remember Pete Matchett, who was the Dean of the Graduate School, and Pete participated in this evaluation, and he commented that Dr. Walker was an excellent spokesperson for the department, and that she was very persistent in making the needs of the department known to her superiors, and I wholeheartedly had to agree with that statement. That was one of her strong points. Now, Carol brought these great administrative skills to the College of Arts and Science when she was appointed director of the Research Center. The principal duty of the director of the Research Center is to foster research throughout the college. But in reality, most of her time and the time of research directors is spent on mundane and very important tasks, such as monitoring research budgets and monitoring and managing the research infrastructure of the college, and most notably at that time, space and computer networking. Under her watch, the Research Center budget was in the black, and as you might expect, the format of the budget reports that go out to heads and directors was noticeably improved. However, there were two budgets that I can remember, there were probably more, but two that required an inordinate amount of her time. And these budgets were those of the electron microscope facility and of the computing research laboratory. To make a long story short, the electron microscope facility was heavily subsidized by the Research Center, even though it was a university facility. The Research Center the Research Center director had to constantly monitor whether the colleges of agriculture and the College of Engineering had paid their share of the yearly bill, and that was always a bone of contention. In addition, the rates charged to the user were very low, and the facility director often had to be reminded to send out invoices and to collect on them. However, Carol helped solve the problem by persuading the Vice President for Research to fund one of the technicians in the laboratory, and that very much helped solve the perpetual problem of the budget for that facility. Now, the Computing Research Laboratory presented a variety of issues. Those used to be called problems, but I guess I'll use the modern vernacular and call them issues. During Carol's tenure, CRL was nominally saddled with more than $1 million in debt that had accumulated in the early days of the laboratory, when the college was told not to monitor the budget because the Vice President for Research was in charge of these centers, and he would do the monitoring. Now, even though we were not responsible for the debt, it appeared on our budget as soon as we got a new Vice President for Research. Since the laboratory was supposed to be self-sufficient, its budget consisted of ongoing grants that nevertheless had to be funded on a yearly basis, prospective new grants that the laboratory director believed had a high probability of being funded, and other monies that were even less secure. Carol's task was to monitor the budget on an almost weekly basis and to make suggestions to the director. Some of these suggestions included be prepared to trim your staff, stop spending money, and be more reasonable in your budget projections. Now, Carol and the director, I have to say, worked very well together, and that the Computing Research Laboratory survived because of this close monitoring. I guess that's what I'm saying, is that one of Carol's greatest attributes as an administrator is her perseverance. For example, one of the greatest obstacles that we faced was establishing computer networking throughout all of the college buildings and many cubby holes. Carol negotiated with the administration to get this problem essentially solved within 3 years, and that I don't know where she learned 3-year plans. I remember the days of the 5-year plan, but she did one better and came up with a 3-year plan that was successful. Her perseverance was sorely tested when it came to acquiring badly needed new space for the college. Nevertheless, she managed to broker reallocations of space in Jacobs and Milton Halls to help satisfy the needs of the departments of Geological Sciences, Government, Theater Arts, and English. Obviously, one of Carol's great talents is multitasking. Now, there's another word that I never thought I'd hear myself say. Isn't it awful? But I find out that it does save a little bit of time. On top of everything else, she managed to maintain a high service load on behalf of the university and the state of New Mexico, and that's another story, and it's one that Carol, I think, could speak on for quite a long time, and so could I. But this service that she has given to the college and the department, and especially the state of New Mexico, and some of it has been talked about, in improving education throughout the state, for example. So she managed to maintain this high service load, and additionally, she continued to do research, publish papers, textbooks, and this was at the time when she was, had this very heavy load as Associate Dean, and in that role as Associate Dean, I truly thank Carol for the great help that she gave me in running the college, that is, managing the college. And so what I would like to say is thank you, Carol, for all that you've done for the university and the college, and also for the state. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Associate Dean Jeff Brown.
Well, my experiences with Carol would be a little bit different from some of the rest of you, because I came to New Mexico State University in 1984, but first met her around 1989 or 1990, and that differs from many of the rest of you. As a historian, I spent all of my time either in Breland Hall or in Hardman Hall classrooms. And to the best of my recollection, the first time I met Carol was on a committee formed by the graduate dean to deal with an unusually complex issue in which I found that she had many of the very same traits, but for me this was my first exposure to Carol, that had been discussed before. That is, she was very hardworking, fair and ethical. She had a great attention to detail, and in my recollection, we wrote our final report in her office with her typing on her computer because she was probably a better writer and definitely a better typist than the rest of us, and also had the best computer. And so I thought that was a good experience, and I'm fairly confident from what others have said that there's a backup file somewhere of that report that Carol still has, so if the graduate school ever needs that, they know where to go. My second experience with Carol was really secondhand, and that is that I was serving on a committee that included our late colleague Joaquin Lustenau. And we talked about our departments, and his attitude about Carol, I think, ranged somewhere between deep respect and awe, which for me was very enlightening, because many of the faculty I had met regarded their department heads with perhaps amused tolerance, and in other cases unamused intolerance. And so this was different for me. So these were my experiences with Carol in the very early years that I was here as a faculty member in a different department. I got to know Carol better when I became the interim associate dean and then the associate dean for academic matters in arts and sciences. And as people have said, she has an enormous capacity for detail and absolute mastery of detail. But what struck me as a new member of the Associate Dean's office was the sheer size of mathematical sciences, the very large number of issues that the department had to work with at all levels, and the very, very capable way in which Carol worked with everyone in her department. Compared to many of the other departments on campus, it seemed to me that mathematical sciences was unusually unified and harmonious and collegial. And I have to assume that after she'd been head for at least a dozen years by that point, that she played a great role in shaping that kind of a department, although I'm sure it also existed as well in earlier years. I got to watch Carol engage in some polite but vigorous discussions with deans from other colleges who felt that they really should be teaching all the mathematics in the university, perhaps under their own prefixes. At least one of them seemed to me to have a flag with a skull and crossbones flying over his office building at all times. And I thought that Carol worked very effectively in getting them to better understand the important role that mathematics played and its own abilities to handle these concerns. I got to know Carol best, I think, during the years in which she was the Associate Dean for Research and Director of the Research Center in our college. As you might expect, she had a mastery of details. She had a very organized and extensive set of records. She brought to the office at all times both real professionalism and a quiet but enjoyable sense of humor that I really liked. I should mention, I guess, that I found that every year I look forward to Halloween
because on Halloween, Carol always wore an elegant blue dress and orange pumpkin earrings. I thought that was just Carol to a T. That was Carol to a T. And Carol had an awful lot of endurance. Department heads may be busy, but in fact, people in the Dean's Office in Arts and Sciences also got pretty busy, especially in January and February when we got to read all the department evaluations of each and every faculty member in the college. And as we went through this process, I began to realize how heavy a role Carol had played as department head. It's actually quite staggering if you think about the amount of work that Carol did year after year, meeting with all the faculty, working with them as they shaped their annual reports, and then coming up with appraisals that would both summarize what they had done, but also help them to see where they could do better, summative and formative. So that was a real joy. After Carol retired, of course, I've continued to see her. I think I actually learned more about her interests in music after she retired than when she was Associate Dean. I got to see her very close relationship with her husband and her children. Obviously, that family was always very important to her. And I was, I think, particularly impressed as well that Carol maintained such an active research program in retirement. At one reception, she and I were talking about this, and we finally concluded, I don't recall whether it was Carol or I, but between us we concluded that retirement was basically just a lifelong sabbatical. You got to do research all the time at 60% of the pay. So this was very enjoyable, and I've delighted in seeing Carol and her family around campus and around town ever since, often on campus, but occasionally in Albertsons buying groceries. And I'm absolutely delighted that the department chose to honor Carol and have this session today. So, Carol, thank you.
The use of these new terms is actually quite interesting. The department was large and had a large number of issues. So issue is the new word for faculty member. The next speaker is Lolina Alvarez, who is the instigator of this event.
By the time I joined the department in 1990, Carol had been department head for more than 10 years. And it was amazing to me to see that she would still be doing that very difficult job with such a fresh attitude and such enormous dedication. Carol kept very long hours in the department, and I saw her very often working very hard at finding happy endings for everybody's issues. And these were whether were faculty, were staff, were students. But actually, she cared for even more than people. Recently, someone who has known Carol much longer than me recalled that he only saw Carol really angry one time when the door to Walden Hall was left open in a cold winter and the bougainvillea almost died. I never noticed Carol impatient or frustrated for the little or no time she had left to pursue her own interests. I always saw her genuinely and unconditionally happy for everybody's achievement. Carol, I admire you, and I can't imagine how thoughtful, how assertive, and how understanding you are. Thank you.
So I'm serving as a stand-in here. May Gerke intended to be here today, Carol. She fully planned to be here. She was just about to buy her plane ticket. May is in the Netherlands this year, and she planned to come here just for today. But unfortunately, some family illness prevented her from coming today, and she, however, has sent me something to read on her behalf from her, and also a little something to show visually. And so I'm going to do that, fully realizing that I can't possibly deliver things in the way that I love that May delivers things and says things, but I'm going to read what May has sent. Dear Carol, I'm so happy that you are being celebrated for all your great achievements. I wish very much I could be there to bear witness to all what you have and still mean to me as one of very many, I am sure. My father is sick, and I cannot go so far away right now, but I hope to be able to convey a bit of how I feel in this statement. Since I am a mathematician and no great literary talent, it will be divided into sterile sections rather than flowing together in a well-balanced composition. Sorry. By the way, the fact that May isn't here gives me a little bit of an opportunity also to inject a little bit of fun myself and perhaps a dig or two at May as I go along here. So May's first section is called Carol as a Human Being. She puts in parentheses that these are Valdemar's choice of words. Valdemar is May's youngest child. First and foremost, Carol is to me an amazing human being. I cannot really explain the meaning of this. It is rather a feeling. I feel like she is steady and calm as the Danish sea on a warm and very quiet summer evening. I also get the feeling in her presence that she is deep and attentive and open, could and is willing to room anything and everything. So when May sent this to me in email less than 24 hours ago, I had to write back to her and tell her, you know, May, maybe your English is better than mine, but I don't quite understand that sentence. I'm just going to read it again. I always get the feeling in her presence that she is deep and attentive and open, could and is willing to room anything and everything. So I wrote back to May and I said, May, I don't quite understand the meaning of the word room there. It was spelled R-O-O-M, you know, room. And I just thought that before reading this out loud, I ought to ask May what she meant. So she wrote back to me, and I didn't bring that email down, but she wrote back and she said, well, yes, there are too many languages in my mind all at once, which I can well imagine is the case for May, given the fact that she's Danish, mostly grew up in the French educational system, is living in the Netherlands, is married to someone from Poland, and so on and so forth. She wrote back and she said, oh yes, well in Danish, she said room, R-O-O-M, that means, well, there's not really a proper English translation for it. But she said, you could try, it sort of means contain. So I got out my Swedish English dictionary and I looked it up. Keep in mind, she said this was Danish, but for me, Swedish is the closest I come. And so I got out my Swedish dictionary and I found the Swedish verb rymma, R-Y-M-M-A, which does indeed mean contain. And so I wrote to May and I said, okay, it's like the Swedish rymma. And she said, oh yes, that's probably right. She said, actually, maybe your Danish is better than mine after all. So anyway, to get this sentence properly, it means I always get the feeling in Carol's presence that she is deep and attentive and open, could and is willing to contain anything and everything. I have now we've got it really the way May means it. I have felt this every time I have interacted with Carol, from my meeting with her as department head during my interview at NMSU in 1990 to our most recent time together at lunch in the University of Oxford Church this August. The first time during my interview, I must admit it was a bit disconcerting, as I mainly wanted to make a good impression, but I could not get any reading of anything she wanted from me. Since then, I did learn to appreciate her approach to heading a department. While it is true that one aspect of her success was based on extreme dedication and hard work, I do believe that the most significant aspect was her ability to listen deeply, think creatively, and, after some possibly disconcerting period of silence, maybe a week or two, take your idea and mastermind an unbelievably brilliant and unexpected implementation, much better than anything you had hoped for. While department heads seem to be a harassed bunch that are very quick to jump to the word no in order to try to protect themselves against the barrage of individual requests, I do not remember this word from Carol. She always came with some very supportive and useful constructive reply, as I said, possibly after a period of silence. I have had some difficult times during my years in New Mexico, and Carol was always there for me. and many times very significantly so. Her particular calm and attentive presence steadied me many times and made me less scared of the future and the past. Carol, I want to thank you especially for that. May's next section is Carol as a mathematician. Remember, this was Carol as a human being. Carol as a mathematician. I, of course, don't know Carol for her real mathematical life, and I am sure others will be able to speak to that. Carol, Elbert, and I were, however, a 7-man research team for several years, working in a field none of us really knew, but in which our particular mix of insights, group theoretic and lattice theoretic, turned out to be the perfect mix. I say Carol, Elbert, and I were a 7-man team. You may think I am bad at arithmetic, and then you are absolutely right. In this case, though, I am not making any mistake. I see that the work that the 3 of us did together, roughly over the period 1995 to 2001, resulted in 16 joint publications, as opposed to the 2 that came out of the work Elbert and I did in 1992 to 94. So if you count papers, and who doesn't these days, then Carol definitely contributed more than her 3/7. Now, at this point, I want to inject a photograph or two that May emailed me this morning. There we go. So this is obviously an indication of the kind of research work that May and Carol and Elbert were involved in. I don't even know where this was taken. It certainly looks like Europe, but why don't you? Where was this taken, Carol? Okay, we're not quite sure. May has taken a lovely picture of Carol and Elbert here, and we'll just go back to this one, which I think shows some very happy mathematical researchers together, whom we all know. And to continue now with what May said, she wrote, "If I may say so, there are among those papers several nice ones. In particular, a paper in which we produce a countable family of equations separating any one strict De Morgan system from any other non-isomorphic one, thus showing there are uncountably many varieties generated by strict De Morgan systems. And to some extent that the hordes of engineers who sit around and tweak their T-norms to get the best fuzzy logic for their application to some extent are justified, as they are indeed changing the logic as they tweak. I really don't know how this family of equations appeared, and I suspect Carol quietly came up with it, while Elbert and I were noisily arguing about pieces of pie and easy cakes. The way we worked together was very much fun, and as far as I know, not so common. We met a couple of times per week for 2 to 5 hours, and we just talked and argued and wrote on the blackboard, and mainly we made fun of Elbert or tried to determine the correct grammatical rule for various English language constructs." Now, the last section from May is Carol as a female mathematician, and May writes, "Carol is both a woman and a mathematician, and that is in itself very remarkable. At the mathematics department at NMSU, one tends to forget this. This is nevertheless so, and much more so at the time Carol became a mathematician than today. I am afraid to say, though, that this means she really is a strange kind of woman. Willing to put up with many things that most women in their right mind wouldn't put up with. This is in addition to all the things that all mathematicians put up with that most people in their right mind wouldn't put up with, such as," this is parenthesis inside parenthesis, "such as being considered somewhat daft, despite the fact that these are some of the most intelligent people around, not being able to share their great excitement about their latest proof with their friends and neighbors, etc. One such hard thing Carol certainly had to deal with was juggling children and work in an environment not at all geared for such juggling. I realized this when I had my children. Camilla was, by coincidence, I am afraid, born just in the middle of the summer vacation. However, when I came and told Carol as my department head that I was expecting Cameron and that he was due sometime in March, she was very surprised at my bad planning. She had her kids at strategically chosen moments. Not to cause such, well, she says problems. I suppose we should just say issues. Carol and I often talked about children and when and how it was important to be there for them. It is clear to me that she has thought long and hard and deep through her years with children about them, what they needed, when, and how. They are lucky to have such a wonderful mother. That's what May sent. So, are we ready for the end? So now we have our special thing. Okay. So before we invite you to adjourn with us for some hopefully delicious food that's waiting outside for us all, we have one other little aspect of this that wasn't announced. Carol, we need you up here. She seems surprised.
Oh, in case you didn't know, this is Carol.
I'm just going to wait on this for a minute. So Carol, there's a little something behind this cloth that we'd like you to unveil, if you would, please. So this is also up here on the document projector. Some of it anyway. And this is a plaque which we plan to hang on the wall of the faculty lounge in the department, along with a beautiful photograph of Carol that she's going to give us so that we can frame it and put next to it. And this is from the Department of Mathematical Sciences at New Mexico State University, expressing its profound appreciation to Carol Walker for her decades of devoted leadership shaping the quality and life of the department, college, and university, and with a little chronology down here below of her contributions here. Thank you, Carol.
We need to mic her.
Oh. Thank you for remembering that, Doug. Okay. Let me fix this.
I'd like to introduce the next speaker.
For this, or should we clip it?
Just hold it. Well, it's impossible to respond to something